Grifter's Bible, a novel by El Shaboons, read by El Shaboons, with sound design by Monumental Sonic Architecture. Chapter 27, 3 Days. It was all over but the shouting by 1 o'clock that afternoon. The agents threw a sack over my head and hauled me outside. I collapsed into the back seat and sat on my cuffed hands. The drive felt like it took up the better part of an hour. They finally yanked me out of the back seat, stood me up, and removed my shoes and belt. They confiscated my socks. They put my shoes back on, but the laces and tongues had been removed. I was shuffled onto an elevator that went down so long that it began to get disturbing. Deep underground. Very deep underground. There's no telling time when you're being swallowed by a whale. They put me in a cell with no sharp corners. They gave me an orange juice. I gulped it down, and within an hour I knew I'd been dosed. I spent a day in psychedelic hell. It broke something inside of me. They yanked the burlap sack off my head sometime on Sunday morning. The twin agents walked me down an empty corridor to a door with a plate reading Interview 2. There was no one inside when they led me in, just 2 empty chairs and a table. There was a box and a stack of folders sitting side by side on the table. 2 half loops were embedded into the formica. One twin sat me down while the other fed a chain through the hoops on the table. There were half loops in the floor as well. One threaded my chains through them and engaged the lock. The boss, the third one I called the Black Dog, didn't have any lanyards or a badge when he came in. There were no stars on his lapel. There was only one of those "Hi, my name is" stickers slapped above his cotton pocket square. "Hi, my name is Eschaton." He sat an envelope down next to the folders. He took a seat. When I looked into his eyes, I saw nothing there. There was only an epileptic patch of skin on his cheek next to his right nostril. "This is the earth," Eschaton steepled his fingers on the top of the brown box, "that I will use to bury you." His upper lip fluttered up and down. I stared at the dark red stitch of vein twitching like a divining rod. It felt like sitting in front of an electric fence. "These are the various patents concerning the federally registered intellectual property that you've been making yourself at home with. Everything here was illegally accessed in an organized conspiracy to perpetrate a protracted act of domestic terrorism and mass population control on a large swath of the American public. All of your electronic communications for the last 6 months are evidence in over 600 pending criminal cases, with you named as one of the 2 primary defendants. And beyond that, we know there's an account that was receiving funds that were funneled out of this right reverend person's business account up until about 8 days ago. As soon as we locate the bank, we'll execute our warrant. And I'll wager that if we sit on that account and wait, then Brother Smith will come right to us. That's why I'm not all that ruffled that the scrubbers weren't able to retrieve him in the sweep." "Ah," I brightened. "Now this is the shovel." He tapped his finger on the top folder in the stack. "You left behind a weak link. Dr. Vu lacked the spine to play macho games in the name of loyalty. He folded like a cheap suit." He plopped his palm down on the stack of folders. "I mean, he practically made this case for us. Without him, we wouldn't have acquired nearly half of the first-hand evidence that we compiled on your activities over the last 6 months. "But he wasn't part of the church," I tried to counter. "He didn't need to be." Eschaton straightened his tie. "Every speaker is a microphone." I thought about all of the equipment we had bought off of Chuck back in the beginning. I guess they had a feature that Chuck failed to point out. Eschaton saw the recognition on my face. "Yeah, we recorded everything inside the church from October to March." He frowned. "Right up until code enforcement shut you down." Eschaton cleared his throat. Place is quiet as a tomb now, I can tell you that. I made a play. Running a church isn't illegal. With a reach like that, I should have learned to box. Eschaton snorted over the mountain of evidence. Do you really want to get into the list of human rights that you trampled? How about the fraud? We've even got you on tax evasion, for Christ's sake. He sneered. My mind raced back and forth in its cage. Eschaton snorted again. The rest of your organization is in custody, so you know. My organization? My box of broken toys. All the people that couldn't steer clear of my horseshit and nonsense. I'm still trying to sort through who gets charged with what. He leaned forward, but everybody's going to jail. Are you going to read me my rights? I had to take a leak. You don't have any rights. He spoke very calmly. You have a letter. Eschaton took out his pen and touched it to the envelope. He slid the envelope forward using the pen. He laid the pen on top of the envelope, inches in front of me. What's this? I leaned forward to inspect the blank envelope. The arm restraints tightened on my biceps. The handcuffs chained to the table cut off the circulation in my wrists. I had to sit back and relax. Eschaton leaned forward and extracted the single sheet of paper from the envelope. He straightened up his posture and smoothed out the trifold on his chest. He smacked the flattened letter back down on the tabletop and pushed it back over so I could read it. I loomed over the paper. I was still tripping. Hard. I shook my head. I gave up. Just sign it, Eschaton insisted as he uncapped the pen. He rose up, grabbed my handcuffed wrist, and smacked it onto the tabletop. I winced, mostly out of surprise. He jabbed the pen into my writing hand and closed my fingers around it. I looked down and saw a line. He picked up my hand and started moving it around with the pen pressed down. He clicked his tongue as he collected the signature in his pen. I guess the mess I made was good enough for government work. He capped the pen and put it away inside his jacket. He folded the page and reinserted it into the envelope. Eschaton lifted the envelope back over his shoulder. The left twin took it, licked the flap, and sealed the envelope. He handed it over to his right, and the other twin took the envelope and put it inside his jacket. Three Stooges. What did I just sign? Eschaton's voice smirked. That's your national security letter. Are you familiar with an NS-42Q document? No. It's a gag order. That letter forbids you from speaking about anything that is said between us, and it covers any contact that we may have from here on out. I looked down at the table. As of this moment, as far as the wider world is concerned, you are a ghost. And I'll reiterate, as of your signature on that letter, any attempt to repeat the notes of this meeting will now be considered an act of treason. You talk about anything I say and there won't be any jails when I'm through with you. I'll just grind up your old rat ass and feed you to my cat. You'll find yourself a mess covered in sand. Do you understand karma? Because that's karma. I didn't say anything. I just turned my head to the left. I looked down at the shimmering patterns on the floor. I released an acidic concoction of orange juice, pink agar, and bile onto the nearest of the skeleton twins' pant leg and shoe. Nobody said anything. None of them moved. I dry-yacked like a cat on a hairball. My belly was racked by violent abdominal spasms for longer than I could stand. There was nothing left to come out after the first couple of spews. I was left a mess of tears and sweat with long stringy mucus and cud just sort of dangling from the corner of my lips. I tried to blow off the snot and blink away the tears. I shook my head to try and dislodge a drop of sweat that was sending me mental with its slow tickling progress down into my right ear. I looked up. Eschaton was watching me, somewhat patiently. "Are you finished?" His tone was even. I hawked a mouthful of residue more or less into the nearest corner. "Yes," I sighed. "All right." He tapped the tabletop and sat back. "I was at Camp X-Ray." He sniffed. "Nothing funny happened on my watch at Gitmo. I made sure of that. Not a single incident went on report during my watch, until Dr. Abraham arrived. I was patrolling the docks about 8 months in. I saw something flash in his hand, and I saw him put something in the water." He leaned back in his chair. It was past curfew, so I escorted him back over to the barracks. At this, Eschaton seemed to stop for drama. He waited, and then carried on. "You might already know. We never got there. The north side of the resource hut was engulfed in flames. His laboratory literally erupted right as we were walking up. The barracks caught on fire a couple of minutes later. Whole camp turned out on alert. We got the fire out in nothing flat, but the laboratory was too far gone by that point. The fire took out all of the servers and the magnetic tape backups in Abraham's lab. And of course the tide had long since taken whatever it was that Abraham had put in the water." Eschaton bit his lip over a bad memory. "They shipped Abraham back to the mainland. I rotated back to the world. I asked to get assigned to asset management. I took a spot in our gulliest office just so I could watch him. I must have seen him haunting the waterfront in every city he lived in after Gitmo, up and down the Gulf Coast. I knew he recovered something from the water at some point. I knew all the work he had done on Guantanamo wasn't gone for good, no matter how hard he tried to sell that line. I followed him all the way to IM. At that, Eschaton stopped and looked very closely at me. He sniffed. "And you were nothing more than a name in parentheses. We were watching him, so naturally we ended up watching you. We must have watched the two of you with your heads together sometimes 10, 11 hours a day. 6 weeks times 7 days times 10 to 11 hours a day. I know Abraham told you a lot of things. We read lips as best we could." Eschaton wrinkled his nose. "After you discharged, I didn't really think about you for weeks. You probably would have remained a footnote in Abraham's dossier, but then you walked back onto the campus at IM. Aw, man." I crumpled inward. "Here comes the avalanche." "Yeah," Eschaton said like he was reading my mind. "You removed a black patented beta device that I was responsible for transporting from IM to where it needed to be delivered." He snorted. "It's not like I was just going to let that thing walk away. I could have had you that night. But," he spread his hands apart, "I took a bet. I bet the safe recovery of our piece of hardware against your potential is an unexploited resource. Of course, as soon as Abraham removed himself from the picture, I had to take my wager a little more seriously. But you were well on your way to proving me right by then. We had a paper trail 3 months long by New Year's Eve. We were monitoring every service by that point." "Ah," that's all I could muster. "Oh yeah." Eschaton was a little more expansive. 4 people. Eschaton arrayed the fingers on one hand. 4 people what? I gulped. 4 people in the world as of last summer with intimate knowledge of the state of the art as far as Abraham's research is concerned. 4 people played a part in fine-tuning his magnetic induction program into a final functional form. And now 3 of them are dead. 3 of Eschaton's dainty red fingers dropped away. That leaves you as the sole heir to a long thread of research that is the rightful property of the United States of America." Eschaton was reading my face. He saw something written there. Eschaton snapped his fingers over his shoulder. "Say, why don't you take a field trip next door? We can take a break and you can rest for a bit." Eschaton stood up, rotated, and walked out buttoning his suit jacket. The twins unhooked me from the table and the floor. I was led into interview room 1. There was one chair sitting in front of a television monitor on an AV cart. I was hooked into the hoops in the floor. They drew the chains tight until I was forced to sit down. One turned on the TV. The other one turned out the light. They left me alone with my sweaty upper lip. They shut the door and locked it from the outside. I wriggled my nose in the dry air. I looked up at the monitor. The screen cycled through several camera views. The first was an interview room. Fat was sitting there spilling his guts to a sheriff's deputy, talking his ass off, probably saying nothing. The next camera showed Velvet T handcuffed and silent. That was disconcerting. Over the course of the next hour, I watched screen after screen showing various scenes from the purgatory that the people that had trusted me had been thrust into. I watched Billy Goat and Barrel holding their own against a room full of bruisers in a holding cell. I watched one of the deputies yelling at Dwayne until the poor kid broke down into tears. They had the street team divided up into male and female cells. Occasionally, a deputy would pick one or two of them out of each group. I'd see them on a following screen being questioned, blubbering. Without Seth around, they all looked especially small and defenseless. None of them looked prepared for where I'd gotten them. Mary was there as well, and that was the one that really got me. She was seated in a white room as still as a pillar on a cloudy afternoon. She must have been sedated. Her eyes just sort of drifted off into the corners, passing over but taking nothing in. The Mary that had beaten back the Roberts clan was not in handcuffs on the screen. I only saw a defeated widow. I watched the husk of a woman cheated by her own beliefs on the monitor. Thankfully, the display cycled past that feed. Velvet T, Fat, Billy Goat, Barrel, and Dwayne. All of them were going to get it because I couldn't keep it together in an office job. Lester, Chester Drawers, Sarah, and Lips Ahoy would all pay the price. They would suffer the penalty for believing in something because nothing I did was in a vacuum. Jim Jim, Fujitsu, and Anna Krakatoa would all go down because I couldn't afford to get high enough to escape all of my troubles on my own. Like a streaming dystopian carnival, the scenes kept changing, returning me over and over to this source and that source of crippling guilt. When the skeleton twins came back to collect me, it felt like I'd been left there for days. My body was wasted, but it still felt better than my mind. I moped the whole way back across the hall to interview room 2. Eschaton was already sitting there drumming his fingers on the tabletop. "What do I have to do?" is all I said once the skeleton twins sat me down and secured me. Eschaton screwed up his face in appreciation of my willingness. Eschaton snapped his fingers. The other twin entered the room and stood at Eschaton's shoulder. Eschaton gave the tabletop a flat-handed pat. The twin stepped from behind him and produced Visuddhimagga from behind his back. He set it on the table and stepped back behind Eschaton. I stared at the book. Eschaton put his index finger down on its cover and pushed it forward his full arm's length. At the end of his reach, he leaned forward and steepled his hand, tapping his trimmed fingertips on the book. "You have the legal status of everyone in your entourage, your flock, in your hands. Are you offering me their freedom if I rat? There's nothing to rat. I've had a team in Indio scanning and analyzing every document in that laptop of yours since Friday afternoon. There's enough written down there to put you, the hippie, and all of your dupes away for as long as I choose. Add the digital logs that were pulled out of your storage space back in Dallas, and you and your big-mouth friend really start racking up life sentences." Eschaton sniffed. "No, I'm not offering you anything to rat. I don't need you to rat. I need to get inside of here." Eschaton took a deep breath. "I know I said I wasn't here to negotiate, but maybe this will make the medicine go down a little quicker. I don't really want to waste the time it'll take to prosecute all of these ancillary players. Any asshole can tell they aren't the vital parts of the machinery of your plot. I'm not overly eager to send a decorated ER nurse and a bunch of indigents to federal prison on racketeering charges. It doesn't read good. The optics stink. I want inside of this drive. I know it came from Gitmo. I can almost smell the salt water. He darkened. So far, we've lost 8 computers just trying to view the directory on it. Why waste any more of our budget on it if I've got you? I opened my mouth. Eschaton held up a finger. I had nothing to say anyway. The fact that your biometrics were the only device we could find that would unlock the fancy little seal on this book went a long way towards pointing you out as Abraham's chosen successor as the guardian of his tech. Eschaton pulled the book back to his side of the table. I'm betting you can get me all the way inside its contents. He inserted his index finger between the foil and the cover. He lifted the cover open, revealing the storage space that Joey had carved out of the inner leaves. This little grimoire represents billions of dollars in research. Eschaton stuck his hand inside the opening. In many years. He lifted his hand out of the book. The world is growing darker. I intend to take this into the long night. He produced the thumb drive within. He sniffed. You are an unexpected link in a chain that leads back to Gitmo. You have the power to resurrect a number of programs. And you can facilitate the start of countless others. He paused. The plastic drive clicked on the tabletop. My eyes were drying out from staring across the table at him. Dad always said to look someone straight in the eyes so they know you're not a gunnif. My brain filled with cortisol and my stomach growled like a wrench turning a rusty pipe in some basement full of evil. I leaned forward without taking my eyes off of him. The straps tightened across my arms and my belly. Epinephrine was pouring out of my glands. My shoulders, back, and neck were soldered into one tense brick-red brittle muscle. In my mind, I saw Mary. I could feel the veins in my temple throbbing. I thought of Jim and Fujitsu trying to function behind bars. I thought of David and I looked across the table at Goliath. My eyes were hot and sore. It had been weeks since I'd had a cigarette, and nicotine sounded like the golden ticket I needed. I wanted to ask for one. I had no spit to speak. After that 6 weeks with Abraham was up and done with, you walked out of a mental health facility and built a working model of a design using a classified device whose existence was hidden to all but about 5 people. I've watched your videos. I recognize the looks in your flock's eyes. I saw that same look in the detainees' eyes back at Gitmo. I remember it from X-ray. Do you have any cigarettes? I spoke up. Eschaton's eyebrows lifted over his glasses. He smirked. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a pack of Tuscan regulars. Cigarettes for a lady. He held the pack over the folders of evidence. He dropped the box onto the top of the tower of paperwork. The skeleton twins led me to a courtyard with a small patch of grass. Then they left me alone with my last cigarette before I gave Eschaton his answer. I kept coming back to Mary. I wanted to believe in the Lord just to have someone to talk to share the weight. I looked up at a gathering storm front. The pale light was so blank, like the reflection of the fluorescence in Eschaton's eyes. I stared at the outline of the disk of the sun. Jesus wept when the Romans speared him. Eschaton came to collect my decision. I looked at the desolation in his eyes. I saw the future. The future is unstoppable, but the future is still unwritten. In Jesus' moment of ultimate despair, he wept. My time came. I looked at Eschaton. I blinked.